So, Peter, this new AI Microsoft thing, $3 billion, big job creators, that's in Racine. Isn't that the same town that Foxconn said, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, we're going to build a big plant, and they never did?
Yes, and that was a huge Trump announcement back then, and he said the factory was going to be the 8th wonder of the world, but then Foxconn decided to really scale back their plans, and the land is still available, so Microsoft is going in.
It's going to be good for those people.
All right. Thank you, Peter.
That was Fox News having to report on a Biden win and a Trump loss, which is always interesting to see. And this is interesting for what it is, as we're about to get into, and also the broader phenomenon it represents. And we'll talk about that as well. But first, here's the reporting on what they were discussing from the Associated Press. Biden visits Wisconsin to laud a new Microsoft facility, meet voters, and troll Trump. President Joe Biden raced into yet another battleground state Wednesday, continuing to push a contrast with Donald Trump on economic policy as his own reelection campaign readies a new $14 million advertising blitz. Biden traveled to Sturtevant, Wisconsin, where he'll highlight a decision by Microsoft to build a $3.3 billion data center that's expected to create roughly 2,000 jobs. Now, as was noted by Steve Ducey there in the clip that you saw, this is a very notable location for this investment to be made. It's also the spot where Trump, to much fanfare, lauded a plan by Taiwan-based electronics giant Foxconn plan to build a $10 billion manufacturing facility that was supposed to eventually employ 10,000 people, except it was never completed. And that was something that fell on its face. And Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft, praised the Biden administration and Democratic Governor Tony Evers for economic policies that set the stage for the developments announced Wednesday. And so, as was noted there, in this exact location, this plot of land was a place where Trump came with his golden shovels with Ron Johnson to celebrate the fact that because of him, at least in part, this investment by Foxconn was going to be made in a facility that would be, as Trump said, the 8th wonder of the world and would create jobs. And like so many of Donald Trump's promises, it didn't happen. And it was a failure. And so it is a good opportunity for Biden to use this as an example of a broader truth, which is that while Trump talks a big talk and makes a lot of promises to working class Americans, Biden, who I think could talk a bigger talk and could brag a little bit more about achievements, he has been quietly governing and implementing policies that actually are working in the interest of Americans in a way that Trump never did. And we'll talk more about the zoomed out picture after watching this Trump being called out by Biden in his remarks today in Wisconsin.
Country's proud manufacturing legacy. Well, we had infrastructure day every week for 4 years. Didn't build a damn thing. He and the administration promised a $10 billion investment by Foxconn to build a new manufacturing complex, create 13,000 new jobs. In fact, he came here with your Senator, Ron Johnson, literally holding a golden shovel, promising to build the 8th wonder of the world. Are you kidding me? Look what happened. They dug a hole with those golden shovels, and then they fell into it. Look, they didn't shovel other dirt. They did shovel some dirt. 100 homes were bulldozed. They wasted hundreds of millions of dollars, your state and local tax dollars, to promise a project that never happened. Foxconn turned out to be just that, a con. Go figure.
Yeah, so again, this is such a great example of the contrast between Trump and Biden, and also a reminder of the promises Trump made, a bunch of them. Biden even referenced the infrastructure promises versus the actual record. And this is something that genuinely drives me crazy. I'll give you 2 examples in this segment that, are crazy to me. But it's an example that perception is reality in politics. And so no matter how great you think the facts portray you, you actually have to go out there and make sure people know that. And in the case of Biden and his surrogates and sort of the Democratic movement, clearly some of this outside of their control, but clearly there's some failure in messaging because people aren't getting it. People aren't getting the record of Biden because I think if you took a really objective look at Biden coming into office during this crisis on all fronts, being faced with all of these issues that his predecessor was wildly mismanaging, and then overseeing the recovery that has outpaced our counterparts and really stunned economists, I think that should, again, taking a semi-objective look at it, should impress most people, even understanding there's much more to be done. And that's obviously not how most Americans see the presidency of Joe Biden or see the policy record of Democrats at large. And so something needs to change on messaging. More events maybe like this could do it, because if people only knew the reality of the contrast between Trump's presidency and Biden's, and how Trump, when he could get something done, it was something like his tax cut bill that sent the benefits disproportionately those at the top of the economic ladder. And obviously Trump dangerously unhinged on top of that. But even just focusing on how they governed in the interest of the working class, there's no competition. And again, people don't see that. So let me give you a couple examples. Biden signed into law the largest investment in infrastructure since the Eisenhower Highway Program. And Trump is given almost as much credit as Biden, according to a poll that is being reported on here by Politico. This is a Politico Morning Consult poll. Trump's given almost as much credit in making investments in infrastructure as Biden is. So among registered voters, you have 40% of registered voters saying that Biden has done more to promote infrastructure investments and job creation. And then you have 37% saying that Trump has done more to promote infrastructure improvements and job creation. And then you have 24% saying either both have done about the same or they don't know. Now that is insane. That is genuinely crazy. Biden should be trouncing Trump on that front. Biden has overseen a record-breaking job record. And he's also overseen these historic infrastructure investments. But the American public's about split on who's to credit for infrastructure improvements. And Trump notably became a joke for how many times he promised infrastructure week and then it never happened. And that's because in right-wing media, as we've talked so much about, you have this incentive structure that creates an environment of just blind pro-Trump propaganda constantly. But then in quote-unquote liberal media or mainstream media, it's not like you have the mirror image of that, and instead, which is good. We don't want that. But instead, you almost have an overcompensation, so terrified of being accused of being too liberal or of being the Fox News of the left. And so then just sometimes accurate coverage is sacrificed because that accurate coverage could seem too in the interest of Biden if you talk too much about these different achievements. Or it might seem too against Trump if you talk accurately about how horrible he is. And thus you get a situation where Trump is way benefited in ways that make absolutely no sense perception-wise. And then right now you have Republicans attacking Biden over crime, saying it's surging. And I've already gone over the numbers that we got out of 2023, more the whole year nationwide, and how we're seeing these huge plummets in crime, and violent crime is near more than 50-year lows and is lower than it was under Trump, obviously. And people don't feel that way. Well, now we're starting to get preliminary numbers on just the last few months of 2024. And it's bunker stuff. So looking at cities, this is great. Imagine the Fox News coverage if you got this in Trump's presidency. In Boston, Massachusetts, again, this is preliminary because it's only May. Yes, I had to check to remember what month it was. So it's just the last 4 months, really. And this is what we're seeing so far in some major cities. Boston has had an 80% decrease. 80% decrease in homicide rates. Hampton, Virginia, 69%. Fort Worth, Texas, 57%. San Francisco, California, the place that is portrayed to be just the most dangerous, you're going to get murdered if you walk down the street, a 42% decrease. Let's see, Austin, Texas, where I live, 40% decrease. And let's see, Nashville, 30% decrease. Philadelphia, 40% decrease. Washington, D.C., 21% decrease. And the general 236 cities index, because this is just comparing different cities, is a 19% decrease in homicide rates. But people think crime is surging in especially cities. They think these democratic cities, when in reality, we've seen quite literally record decreases in homicides under Joe Biden because of the pandemic related surge and then huge efforts under his administration to get crime rates down and great work on the local level as well. So it is discouraging sometimes that the facts can be one thing and perception can be so different. But I guess the best we can do is talk about it. And as I've said before, if we want to make people's lives better, don't we have to understand, as much as we understand negative trends, shouldn't we understand positive trends so we can further those trends? So if you actually care, as Fox News, for example, pretends like they do, about decreasing crime, you got to understand why it's decreasing so rapidly under Biden so that we can maximize for those variables. And that's what they don't seem to want to do, which is not in the interest of people and their communities, which I think is sick. Let me know what you thought about that in the comments.